No? Okay. Other warriors are now binned. I have I have moved all of those warriors very much down on my list of characters. I haven't deleted them because you never know when you might need to do some degenerate mirror shit again. But yeah, I have moved them down. Look, Danwarr is now here. Dan Hunting, Project Dan Hunting is beginning. By the way, you can tell because he looks glorious. But Project Dan Hunting is starting. Let's get it. Survival Hunter? Yeah. Yes, indeed. Have I been able to see the F1 races? I haven't. Not really. No. Yeah, not really. Mandatory hero boosts? Yeah, I saw that. I got very happy when I saw that they're being made mandatory. But whatever. Sooner we get them done. Sooner we get them done, sooner we can not have to do them anymore. Although that being said, I will still probably do some once I've made the gold back that I need to. I could do with a bit of gold. I didn't spend that much gold this tier, actually, because obviously most of it is spent by the guild anyway. But I think, personally, I think I only spent just over 1 million gold or so. Which is pretty cool. Is Method going to do a LAN event next world first? That's the aim. The aim was to do a LAN event for this raid. But, yeah, everything fell through last minute, which was unfortunate. But we'll definitely look to do one next year. For sure. And I'd love to go. I would love to go. Meet the boys. Did I see the news about Season 4 with all 3 raids open at the same time? I did. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about it. It's a cool idea. I'm more hyped for them opening other M+ dungeons. But I'm not entirely sure how to feel about it when it comes to the raid side of things, because I don't know who's actually going to do that. Because there's going to be no race to world first for Season 4, because why would there be? There could be charity events, I suppose. A very small minority, I'd imagine. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. It's a decent idea. We'll see if any top guild implements it at all. I imagine things like charity events and stuff might be good for it, but yeah. There'll be new gear eye level though. Yeah, but is anyone really gonna care? You know? Is anyone really gonna care? Because at the same time, like, yes, it'll be new item level, which is, again, a neat idea, but if you... It's the end of an expansion. All of that gear that we get, whether it's higher item level or not, is going to be made completely irrelevant the moment we get into the next expansion, or the moment we get max level in the next expansion, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. Congrats on World Second, thank you, Dota. How do you feel about Warriors and M+ and raiding at the moment? Warrior and raid right now is clearly very good. I don't think they are as strong as they were in Sanctum. I think that they're a little bit, comparatively based on the raid itself, I think they're a little bit weaker than they were in Sanctum. But they're still really fucking good, and they're so fun. Like, this Fury setup, this Fury build right now with the Force set is super fun to play. Really fast, but super fun to play. It's also incredibly annoying when you sit there and press Raging Blow like 8 times in a row and don't get a proc. But it is what it is. In M+, I think Fury's going to be strong, but I don't think it's going to be meta. I think it's going to have the same position it always has, where everyone knows it's strong, but it's not meta, so fuck it. But we'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of out of the loop with M+, because, yeah. Warriors and killing themselves with Raging Blow charge. Luckily, you won't have to deal with that in M+, because we won't play Reckless Abandon, so it's fine. God, that happens so much on Halondrus. I think I killed myself with that 4 or 5 times on Halondrus, which is 3 or 4 times too many. What's meta? I've no idea. I'm too out of the loop. I just don't see what warrior would bring that other classes don't also bring, as well as like significantly larger AoE damage. But we'll see. What kind of stats do you recommend as Fury? Item level over haste over mastery. Will I participate in MDI? No. Not this time round. Maybe next expansion, but... Or next season if they do another season. Like maybe in season 4 or something, but not in this season, I won't do it. How about single target Fury without a tier set? I mean, it's still good. It's still really good. It's still very good. Shard damage and plus 23 holes. Let's fucking go. I love that. Optimistic for Warlock. I am as well, to be fair. They just look overwhelmingly strong. They just look overwhelmingly strong. I'm a little bit, yeah. I'm a little bit optimistic for them as well. And Survival Hunter if they can live. When do you switch from anger management to reckless abandon in raid? After 2 set or 4 set? 4 set on single target fights. So I'll give you a breakdown of what I used on each boss. Because obviously I came into Mythic with 4 set already on. So, yeah. Vigilant Guardian, I played AM because there is a significant amount of AoE to be done in the very start of the fight, even if you are only hitting the boss itself. So the way I played the boss was to literally just main target the boss and just cleave onto the AoE. So I played Frenzy, I played Impending, I played Sudden Death, I played Warpaint, Cruelty, Blade Storm because I was playing with Signet, and Anger Management. And literally just spent all my time cleaving onto ads while single targeting the boss. Not main targeting sentries, never did. Literally never did. That's why my boss damage was so high on that fight. That's why all the warriors' boss damage was so high on that fight. Never main targeted a sentry. Ever. It was a waste. Resetting my frenzy stacks was a waste. Skolex, I mean, it was pure single target, so that was Sudden Death, Impending, Frenzy, Warpaint, Cruelty. I did play Dragon Roar. I feel like Meat Cleaver in hindsight might have been better. And I played Reckless Abandon. Pure single target, not much movement. Yeah, it's pretty easy. Zymox, oh, I also played Necro on Skolex, by the way, and I played Kyrian on... Did I play Kyrian? Or did I play Night Fae? I think I played Kyrian on Vigilant Guardian. Zymox, I played Kyrian. Zymox was really annoying because I wasn't chosen as one of the warriors to go over to the first set of ads. So my cooldowns were really balked. My cooldowns were super balked. It meant that my cooldowns on pull had to be put into the boss. I then couldn't get my cooldowns back quick enough. Or rather, at the point that my cooldowns came back, I wouldn't have been able to use them again on the ads and intermission if I was going to be able to use them going onto the ads on the second platform. So it basically meant that I was 2 sets of AoE behind everyone that had gone over to the first platform because I was going on to the second platform. But it is what it is. But Kyrian Fury with Signet again, I think I played. And I played with pretty much the same setup as I did on Vigilant Guardian. Sudden Death, Impending, Frenzy, Warpaint, Cruelty, Blade Storm, AM. Yeah, that was just pretty much what it was. Dorsane. Dorsane, just like every other warrior who had killed it at the time, I played Venthyr Arms. And the reasoning behind it was not because Venthyr Arms is necessarily insane amounts of damage, but it's literally just for safety. Because the boss loses 40% of its HP naturally through the fight, regardless. So, you play Venthyr so that you can teleport over the rings, and therefore your healers don't have to heal as much, and you have less chance of dying. It also means that you can teleport over 2 rings at the same time, which is just actually probably a DPS gain overall, because it means that you don't have to be away from the boss for a significant amount of time, like you would be if you were Night Fae. Outside of that, I just played a pretty standard setup on Dorsane. The reason for arms specifically was because there's a core which spawns every 30 seconds, and 30 seconds is the same cooldown as sweeping strikes. So every single time a core spawned, you had cleave ready to go for it. Setup I played for that boss was a pretty basic one. It was basically something like that. No, sorry, I played double time, obviously. Sudden Death, double time, Rend, Death Stance, Warbreaker, Avatar, Dreadnought. Just a very simple, basic, straightforward. That was the one of 2 bosses I played arms for. The other one was Lords of Dread, but we'll go into that in a moment. Prototype Pantheon, I wasn't in on the first kill, which pissed me off to no end, because that is a weapon boss, but never mind. Prototype Pantheon, when I did play it, I played Kyrian again. I played Kyrian with AM. I mean, it's just an AoE fight. The way to consider Prototype Pantheon is that it is legitimately an AoE fight. The first 2 phases are not hard enough to base your entire setup around. The 3rd phase is by far the hardest one. It's a relatively tight DPS check, and there's a shit ton going on, so you want to get through that phase as quickly as possible. So yeah, I just played with basically what was an AoE setup. So not only did I play with Signet, I also played with Bone Grinder as well on this fight, for example, because, 4-target Bone Grinder is really, really good. Talent setup was... I don't remember what I played now. I think it was something like this again. The reason why I still wanted to play Frenzy is because, I mean, there was never a moment that you had to swap target off of any of them as long as the cleave was even. And as long as you're putting Rampages into the same target, you can still mouse over with Bloodthirst and Execute to try and maintain some level of balance over the four bosses. That and the rest of the raid should also be good enough to target whatever's highest, that you can get away with putting Rampage into the same target again and again, because it's going to increase your damage overall on that fight no matter what. So yeah, that was pretty much what I ran there. Lehuvim was a weird one. Lehuvim was a very weird one, because there was some very specific cooldown timings. Like, I wasn't able to use Wreck on pull. I effectively considered it a single target fight with a bit of cleave here and there. Fucking Jerv. I'll get to you in a moment. I considered it basically a single target fight with a little bit of cleave and AoE thrown in, so I still chose Bladestorm, even though... So here's the thing, for a fight that had very, very minimal amounts of AoE, I still played with Bladestorm, and I still played with Merciless Bone Grinder. I didn't play with Hammer of Genesis, we played triple potency, so it was Depths, Hack, and Merciless Bone Grinder. Talent setup pretty much looked a little bit like this, in all honesty. Honestly, right, one thing I want to make very clear right now is that Impending Victory is the single most overpowered self-heal in the game ever. Ever. This, if as a Fury Warrior, you are still playing double time, stop. Stop playing double time. You don't need it. You don't need that much mobility. We have enough. You play Impending Victory. You play Impending Victory 1000%. 1000%. You need to play this. You need to play this. It's very, very big. It's very, very important. Is that with the 4 set in mind? No, it wouldn't be with the 4 set in mind. Literally, without 4 set. The moment that got buffed, you should be playing it all the time. A 40% heal on a 25-second cooldown. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Holy shit. That's huge. That's what she said. Where was I? Yeah. Lehuvim. So it was a bit of a weird one. Wreck and what was I saying? Wreck and Spear ended up being desynced sometimes, particularly on pull. because killing the ads in the little intermission phases was super fucking important. Meaning that I ended up using Wreck a lot specifically for that. I'll go into that a little bit more sometime in the future when I actually sit and go over my VODs of each kill. But I'll do that in the future, and I'll explain things a little bit better at that point. It probably won't be today. I mean, it might be today. It might be later this evening. We'll see. But this is the setup that I played on Lahubim. It was effectively a single target fight with some meaningful amount of AoE in the middle. So Blade Storm and Bone Grinder were still very, very important. Halondra... Halondra's was cool. I played Night Fae. I played Night Fae because the mobility is super important in case you ever need to help with bombs, and there is a lot of... So here's the thing about Night Fae. Let me go show you this. Let me go show you this. Night Fae is so fucking overpowered when it comes to defensive soulbind traits. In all honesty, I'll show you. Some of you probably already know, but I want to show you anyway. This is also part of the reason why I wanted to play Night Fae. I did spend a lot of time saying how it was the mobility that I was mostly playing Night Fae for, but honestly, now that I look back at it, that's not true. Night Fae with Forset, if you're playing Reckless Abandon, Night Fae with Forset makes sense, because then Wreck and Aftershock are going to line up every single time. So that's obviously a big win, especially if you're playing something like Naya, which I was. So, boom, right. Look at that. This thing is one of the most overpowered defensive soulbind traits in the entire fucking game. Now, part of the reason why I wanted to play, well, why I ended up playing Naya over Dreamweaver, I said this before. I tried both Dreamweaver and Naya. Dreamweaver was fine for the first two phases because you could get away with moving very, very little if you really pushed it. But when it came to phase 3, you ended up moving constantly, so you weren't able to make use of Field of Blossoms whatsoever. Also, Waking Dreams, it doesn't take a lot to make Waking Dreams proc. And while I've always said that damage mitigation is always better than damage recovery or healing, it kind of doesn't make sense when it's being procced more or less off cooldown every time you drop below 80%, which doesn't exactly take a lot. Like, literally, you run into a moat, and you take more than 20% of your HP in damage, so you then suddenly get that shield. So it's less likely to save you in a situation where it's actually needed, compared to Naya, which has a self-heal, increased healing on a spec that does a lot of self-healing anyway, especially with Impending Victory, and it procs only when you drop below 50% HP, which is a time when you are probably going to need that healing. Probably. You're more likely to need the healing going below 50% than you are going below 80%. If that makes sense, right? I did also end up playing with double potency and burrs, but that was literally only because burrs and adaptive armor fragment are not too dissimilar when it comes to damage, and playing with burrs also meant that I had access to another defensive conduit, which was pretty nice, you know. So yeah, that was basically my Halondra setup. And what did I play? I think I played this again. Literally just like a bog standard single target setup for Halondras. I'm still not sold on Dragon Roar. Like, Dragon Roar's okay, it's just really difficult to fit into a Dragon Roar's okay, it's just really difficult to fit into your rotation when you're getting, like, you know, a shit ton of procs from Raging Blow. But yeah, no, it was fine. And like I said before, not that we have to worry about it anymore, but I was consistently or quite regularly swapping between Nature's Fury and Deathmaker because I couldn't work out which one I thought was better. I eventually settled on Deathmaker because we found that the damage and intermissions was really fucking important. And obviously you're never going to have... You're never putting down Aftershock on the intermission phases, so your legendary isn't giving you anything in the intermission phases whatsoever. But Deathmaker does, you know, you get a Deathmaker proc, you're doing more damage. It's really good. That's one of the things that also might have played into the advantage of Dreamweaver, because when Halondrus is walking, Burrs misses. It goes down, but Halondrus moves too quickly and just walks past it. So you're not getting any extra damage out of that. But you are getting a few little procs of Grove Invigoration, which is okay, whereas Dreamweaver has a consistent... I hate that word. But has a consistent 3% extra damage done. So it's you know, it's a pretty tough decision between the two of them. But I ultimately just think Naya's better on that fight, particularly for the defensive benefit. Anduin. So right, I think, how do I put this? You always try to align Wreck and Spear with Recklessness, or using Spear on CD? For M+, I always try and align it. But a lot of it also comes down to the talents that you're using. It's gonna align more often than not with anger management. If you're playing Reckless Abandon, you can probably just fit in a Spear in between Wreck cooldowns anyway. It means you'll be sat on Wreck for a bit, but that's okay. That's not terrible. Anduin, I played Night Fae again. Played Karain. Reason behind playing Karain and not playing Mechanicos for Kyrian is that First Strike is higher value than Hammer of Genesis, and Hammer of Genesis has to ramp up. The ramping up doesn't matter hugely when it comes to... the ramping up doesn't matter hugely when it comes to the intermission phases on Anduin. But First Strike has so much... I said this on my Discord earlier today even, or last night. First Strike is full value immediately, and it extends so much because there's so many ads that are spawning that you get a shit ton of benefit out of First Strike, and it's going to net you more damage in a damage increased phase than the extra haste would. The extra haste isn't going to offer you much, especially when you're bloodlusting the first intermission phase anyway. You end up just getting too much haste. That's kind of the main driving force behind playing Karain rather than Mechanicos. Talent setup, what was talent setup like? Like that, I think? Pretty much like that. There was another build that was being used by Lighty on this fight, where he literally just played like Giga single target with minimal AoE cleave. I tried playing that build once, but I think it's a testament to the amount of damage that Liquid had as a guild. Because I don't know whether it was just us not being used to the fight, and I was considering swapping away from the AoE build again once I'd swapped back to it. But yeah, we ended up having a little bit of issue with Lost Souls either dying too fast or not fast enough, so I gave myself a little bit more control over AoE. But this build would work out quite well. It's literally just focused on doing as much single target damage as possible, which is also good for the Remnant of the Fallen King and intermission phases. You still play Karain. Because as Shella says, there's also the 10% flat increased damage to the Remnant in the intermission phases as well, which is also a lot of boss damage. Even if it doesn't offer you that much in the final phase. But to be fair, Karain not offering you much in the final phase doesn't really matter, because you come into the final phase already in Execute, so as a warrior with Forset, you already have a shit ton of extra power there anyway, that lacking a good soulbind for the final phase doesn't matter. That, and at the point that we killed it, the final phase did not matter anyway, because the stars were broken, but, you know. Yeah. And now we just have too much damage for it to matter anyway, so who cares? Who cares? Stars down bad. Stars down bad. Stars down bad. Lords of Dread. Right. Now, this is definitely one that I'm going to go a bit further into on a like a VOD review at some point, either later tonight or tomorrow or something. But also because of one of the changes that they made recently, where it's not only AoE abilities that affect the that are increased by Swarm anymore, it means that the build that was being played is no longer necessary, which is such a shame because it was such a cool way to play this fight. So I'm not going to go into Lords of Dread too much because I'm going to save that for going through it on an actual VOD review. But Lords of Dread build looked like... It's so sad. Honestly, this build was so fun to play, but Lords of Dread build looked like... Was that it? Yeah, that was it. Lords of Dread build was this. We also played with Dreamweaver. That was the tree we played as Dreamweaver as well. So a few things to note. Something that I will say, which I think is still relevant now, because the timings haven't changed at all, so it is still relevant. You don't need to play Stalwart Guardian on Lords of Dread, because the swarms, which is the most damage intensive part of the fight overall, are 2 minutes apart. So you're always going to have Stalwart Guardian back even with... Oh, sorry, you're always going to have Die by the Sword back even without the Conduit. So it's just a waste of a slot. So I ended up playing with Safeguard to... I ended up not using it and basically just started intervening whoever it was that needed it at the time. But we had a chain of intervenes on all the warriors in the raid for each swarm phase. But we took some of the lowest amounts of damage every swarm, it felt like, just because we have some really overpowered defensive cooldowns, so that we ended up not really using it. But man, the way that you played this fight was so good. We actually had a ramp, which was really cool. But yeah, like I say, it's not so relevant anymore. It's not so relevant anymore, which is it's sad, but it is what it is. It's made the fight a lot easier now that you don't have to worry about very specific class stacking. You're not necessarily going to see like 4 survival hunters on that fight anymore. But yeah, no, it is what it is. Like I say, I won't go too much into that. Rygolon. Rygolon was Night Fae again. I played Fury. Now, this is where I disagreed with Reva's decision to play Arms a bit. I still don't fully understand why he would play Arms over Fury on this fight, because I feel like Fury is just significantly better single target damage anyway. So I can only assume he was doing it for the exaggerated cleave, I guess. But even that doesn't make a huge amount of sense, considering that this was a fight you played Meat Cleaver on. So the decision behind playing Meat Cleaver is legitimately just to maximize single target damage while spending as fewer globals on cleave abilities as possible. So every time some Quasars came out, you would use one Whirlwind to get the Meat Cleaver buff up and have the 4 stacks of it. And then by the time you'd used all 4 stacks, if you had Wreck Up, which you normally did, if you went Rampage, Raging, you could go Rampage, Raging, Rampage. And any Quasar that was close by was just fucking dead between 2 or 3 warriors playing that way. Every single time. Every single time. But it also meant that you weren't overspending globals on Whirlwind, which was also really nice. I feel like this was just the best way to play Rygolon. And I still can't quite understand why Rivers went Arms. It just felt so subpar to me. But, nah, it is what it is. But that was pretty much the setup for Rygolon. Also played Karain because, again, similar thing to Anduin, just not quite as exaggerated. I feel like Kyrian would also have worked very well, but because you're playing with Reckless Abandon, then Rek's obviously on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so you have it lining up with every Aftershock. You also have Wild Hunt Tactics with every single Quasar that spawns, so you're doing extra damage across pretty much the entire fight. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And I still say that First Strike is better value than Hammer of Genesis. Mechanicos would also work really well on this fight, but again, Spears on a sub 1 minute cooldown compared to 1.5 for Wreck, you would literally just use them off cooldown at that point. You wouldn't care about lining them up, I don't think. But the actual ramping up of Hammer of Genesis plays to Mechanicos' advantage on that fight because of how the Quasars spawn and the way that you want to kill them. There is enough time that you'd probably be able to extend 5 stacks quite decently across, not the entire fight, but certainly in every main phase that isn't a downstairs phase with the cores. But I swear to God, Raglan was easily my favorite fight this tier and one of my favorite fights of all time. This fight was so sick. I adored it. I missed this fight. And the Jailer, the reason why Kyrian was being played more so than... Well, the reason why Kyrian was played over Night Fae was pretty much just due to P2. It was pretty much just due to P2. Like, having multiple spears for the MCs was really, really valuable. Spears kind of OP in that moment. And Kyrian's not that much worse single target than Night Fae is anyway, so... Yeah. It is what it is. A lot of the power of Warrior has come from the 4 set anyway, so... Covenants can easily be swapped. I miss you, Quep. If you really loved it, why'd you kill it so fast? Because we were still in a race, Turtle. That's why. Kina told me we were still in a race, and I was like, yes, sir. Killing fast now. Killing fast. Ugh. Chat, I really don't... Chat, Chat, I really don't want to go and do boosting. I really don't want to go boosting. I'm so sad. I'm so sad. I'm so sad. The Warriors and Method was the targets for Night Fae CDR Priest ability. In P1 and P2, me and Faithy were getting the Night Fae Priest ability, yes. Did Venthia fall that far behind it wasn't worth even on the extended execute on Jailer? Well, here's the thing. If you were focused purely on execute, you still wouldn't play Venthia because Condemn is so incredibly weak. You would be more likely to play Necro than you would be to play Venthia, in my opinion. Weapon didn't drop, no. How do I like the new Jailer weapon? It's good. It's a little bit annoying. It's a little bit annoying unless you have someone like Andy who can go around and kill your souls for you. But yeah, it is a little bit annoying. But other than that, it's really good. Someone will get world first mace. They already have. One of the warriors in Skyline got it on their kill. Nikki's supposed to throw out Frost Stroke. They can't see the soul, I don't think. I don't think they can kill the soul anyway. Only people with the mace can kill the soul. Didn't Echo get a mace on Frago? Not a mythic one, I don't think. Not a mythic one. We miss playing keys with you. Could you just sell your soul instead of doing boosts and come play keys? I wish I could, but I cannot. What's thoughts about Venthia on Halondrus? I just honestly don't think Venthia is that good. I really don't. I think it's too execute focused, and it's not even that good at its job. Like, legit, it's not even that good at its job. I still think that other Covenants, in particular Necro, will do execute better than Venthyr will do execute. The only advantage that Venthyr really has is that you're kind of put in a position where you're forced to make the execute longer because you want to be playing Massacre over Frenzy. That's the only advantage that it has. You know? I think about the Mastery Trinket for M+, the one from Tazavesh. I think it's bad for M+. The procs from the Ticking Sack of Terror, they don't do AoE damage. They only do damage to the target that they're on. So, yeah. Pretty bad. Pretty bad. How does the soul work? Well, the soul itself only has like 20-30 HP. So all you know, if I can show you. So you use it, soul comes out, soul has 30 HP. You can't cleave it, so I can't whirlwind it. And the cleave coming from whirlwind doesn't affect it either. So you have to actively target it and kill it yourself. It does mean that mouse over abilities will work. So what I was doing before we got Andy his was just mouse over bloodthirsting after a rampage. Or no, just before a rampage. Just before a rampage. And then with the buff, I would go into rampage and actually start using my cooldowns properly. And just blasting. What buff do you get? You have 1 out of 5 buffs that you can get. The one that I have right now is an AoE one, which is just a chance on attack to deal AoE damage, and it gives you increased armor. There's one of them called Boon of the End, which is increased strength and a chance on attack to proc frontal cone damage. The damage from Boon of the End is not that high. I think it's mostly focused around the strength that it gives you. It gives you like 300 or 300 plus strength or so. You have Boon of Assured Victory, which is a stacking dot, a stacking disease dot on the target, which does a lot of damage. And you have Boon of Harvested Hope, which is a bleed on the target, and the bleed will heal you for the amount that the bleed heals every single time it ticks. And what's the last one? What is the last one? I don't remember what the last one is. It's the Night Fae boon, which I can't remember what its name is. But it has a chance on attack to deal damage and shield you. Looming Winter, that's the one. It'll do damage and it'll give you an absorb. Straight up. And that also does a lot of damage on single target, to be fair. That also does a lot of damage on single target.